My brother Jake took me in after our parents died in that fire. I clung to him, too stunned to question anything. But when he locked away Mom's letters, I felt a twist in my gut. I kept setting 3 plates at dinner out of habit, out of hope. Now Jake's in jail. And I'm fighting for my own freedom. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Before everything collapsed, Jake used to make us pancakes on Sundays. He'd smile, hum Mom's favorite tune. I thought he was holding us together. But one morning, I noticed Dad's watch was missing. Jake said he pawned it for bills. I swallowed my doubts. Thomas, our lawyer, told me to keep an eye on things. I laughed it off, gripping Mom's untouched mug like it still carried warmth. The night after the funeral, Jake turned off my phone and said I didn't need outside noise. I remember thinking he was just being protective. Aunt Nina praised him for stepping up. But when he shredded my grief counseling referral, something cracked inside me. I started writing everything in a spiral notebook Mom gave me. It felt like the only thing that was still mine. When I asked Jake to sign the school field trip form, he snapped, "You're not going anywhere, I don't approve." I froze, clutching the paper. Thomas called that night, asking about missing insurance checks. Jake said they went to repairs though there were none. I tried calling Aunt Nina, but Jake had blocked her number on my phone. I hid the notebook under my bed. My hands shook every time I heard his footsteps. I found Jake's tablet unlocked one afternoon. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through betting apps, thousands lost. Some recent I screenshotted everything and sent it to Thomas from the school library computer. That night, Jake accused me of snooping, eyes wild. "Don't mess with what you don't understand," he hissed. I told myself he was stressed. But my old teddy bear, now missing an eye, stared at me like even it didn't believe me anymore. Jake got a tattoo of a serpent coiled around a dagger. He said it was for strength, but he flinched when I asked what it really meant. At dinner, he made me eat silently while he counted bills. Thomas warned me Jake might be hiding more. My grades slipped, and a teacher asked if everything was okay. I lied. That night, I tore a page from the notebook and hid it in my shoe. One morning, Jake tossed my mom's jewelry box into a bag. "We need cash," he muttered. I reached for the locket. He slapped my hand away. I didn't cry. I waited until he left and called Thomas from school. He said he'd file for an investigation, but warned me it could take weeks. That night, I pressed the locket imprint on my palm like a brand. Jake didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I overheard Jake on the phone whispering about cleaning up the mess and getting rid of it. My breath caught. I followed him to the garage and found the storage trunk once filled with our parents' keepsakes empty. He said he donated it all. I knew he lied. I searched for the notebook, gone. I curled under the bed, fist clenched. Thomas texted, "Court review delayed." The air felt thick, like danger pressed against every wall. Jake made me delete my social media. "You're too vulnerable," he said, locking my phone in a drawer. That night, I wrote a letter to my parents, hiding it behind the bathroom mirror. Thomas warned me Jake might contest my emancipation request. I wore Mom's scarf to sleep, breathing in faded lavender. When Jake knocked, I didn't answer. I was done pretending everything was okay. I was done being his silent little sister. Thomas arranged a meeting at his office. I brought what little proof I had: screenshots, torn notebook pages, Mom's missing checkbook. Thomas added them to a thick file labeled protective custody. When he handed me the copy of Jake's signed guardianship forgery, my stomach flipped. Jake had lied to everyone, even the court. I stared at his signature. It was Mom's handwriting, forged and shaky. Everything I feared was suddenly real. Jake showed up at Thomas' office, yelling about betrayal. I sat frozen as he shoved papers off the desk. "She's manipulating you," he roared. Thomas stepped between us. "You're done, Jake." I pulled out the scarf Mom gave me. "You're the one who ruined everything," I said. Jake's face twisted. Security dragged him out. That moment watching him lose control was the first time I didn't feel powerless. The next day, HSBS visited. They asked questions I'd never said out loud before, about fear, control, the bruises I pretended were clumsy accidents. I told them everything when they left. I sat in the hallway, knees to chest. Thomas placed the notebook in my lap. He'd found it wedged under his desk. I opened to the first page. "If you're reading this, it means I'm still here." I wasn't invisible anymore. Jake filed for emergency custody, claiming I was mentally unstable. Aunt Nina supported him, wearing Mom's necklace like a trophy. The court ordered a psych eval. I sat in the sterile room, gripping the locket Thomas recovered. "Do you feel safe at home?" the counselor asked. I said no. It was the smallest word, but it opened every locked door inside me. I wasn't just fighting Jake anymore. I was reclaiming myself. Thomas discovered that Jake had withdrawn $10,000 from Dad's retirement account, using falsified power of attorney. The paper trail led back months before the fire. He planned this, Thomas said. I couldn't breathe. Aunt Nina, who once hugged me after Mom's eulogy, had co-signed. My world tilted. The scarf I wore to every hearing it had a burn mark I'd never noticed. How much had they both hidden? Who else knew? An anonymous letter arrived at Thomas's office. Inside, a photo of Jake, late at night, near the gas line behind our house, dated the week before the fire. My hands went numb. The letter ended with one sentence: "She deserves to know the truth." Thomas filed an emergency motion. That photo changed everything. Jake's calm, composed lawyer panicked. Aunt Nina stopped answering calls. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. My instincts had screamed. No one had listened. Jake tried to run. Police caught him halfway to Nevada, carrying fake kids and $10,000 in cash. At his arraignment, he refused to look at me. I clutched the notebook, now marked as evidence. Thomas whispered, "We're almost there." Aunt Nina tried to claim she was manipulated too, but emails showed otherwise. The courtroom buzzed as I stood. He didn't just steal money. He stole my childhood. Silence followed, but I didn't shrink anymore. Aunt Nina begged for visitation rights. The judge asked me directly. My heart thudded. I remembered her cold eyes in court, her silence when I cried. "No," I said clearly. She stood by while he hurt me. The judge nodded. Outside, press gathered. A reporter asked, "Do you feel safe now?" As I looked at Thomas, then at the courthouse doors behind me. "I'm not safe yet, but I'm finally heard." It wasn't safety, but it was power. I testified again, this time about the fire. Thomas revealed forensic reports. The gas line had been deliberately loosened. Jake's fingerprints matched the valve. The courtroom turned icy. Aunt Nina covered her mouth. "He wanted the insurance," Thomas said. My breath hitched. The scarf around my neck, Mom had used it to wrap her jewelry that night. It reeked of smoke for days. My hands shook. The truth wasn't just horrifying, it was permanent. Jake planned their deaths. Jake's lawyer argued I was too young to understand, but the judge reviewed every page of my notebook. She chronicled abuse with more clarity than most adults. he said, and my face burned, but I didn't look away. The courtroom wasn't silent, it was listening. Thomas handed me back the notebook as we walked out. You wrote your way to truth, he said. I gripped it like armor. I hadn't just survived, I'd documented my survival. The community turned fast. Teachers apologized, the counselor offered real support, classmates stopped whispering, and started sitting with me at lunch. Someone left a sunflower on my locker with a note, we see you. I carried the scarf every day, not as memory, but as protest. I was no longer a rumor. Thomas filed for full emancipation. As I signed the petition, my hand didn't shake. This time, I chose what happened next. Jake's confession came in fragments through lawyers, plea deals, and scribbled notes. He admitted he tampered with the gas line, hoping to force an early payout. I didn't mean for them to die, he wrote, but he had. The court sentenced him to 15 years. Aunt Nina got probation for aiding fraud. I watched it all from the front row, scarf knotted tight around my wrist. Justice didn't fix the past, but it stopped the bleeding. After the sentencing, a reporter handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was an old photo, me, Jake, and our parents at the beach. On the back, Mom's handwriting, protect each other always. I broke down. Thomas said it could have been planted for sympathy, but I knew it was real. Mom had believed in him once. The photo didn't excuse what Jake did, but it reminded me who we all used to be before everything cracked open. Thomas told me the judge expedited the emancipation process. You'll be free before your next birthday, he smiled. I didn't know how to respond. Freedom felt distant, like a word adults tossed around. But when I walked into the house alone and lit a candle for Mom and Dad, something shifted. The flame flickered against the photo frame. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing to live. This house would never be home, but I would. The school held a memorial for my parents. I didn't speak, but I placed Mom's scarf and Dad's watch on the table beside the candles. The counselor nodded at me. No pressure, just presence. A classmate squeezed my hand. I hadn't expected community, not after months of whispers, but grief was quieter here, less cruel. I walked home in silence, the breeze wrapping around me like something sacred. Maybe healing didn't shout, maybe it just stayed. Thomas handed me my emancipation approval outside the courthouse. It felt surreal, just paper, but heavier than anything I'd held. You're legally free, he said. I stared at my name in bold type. I didn't cry, I didn't smile, I just exhaled. Later I took down every photo of Jake in the house. Some I burned, some I boxed. My room felt unfamiliar but mine. That night I wrote Collie Morgan 15 survivor free. That was enough. I was offered a chance to speak at a youth safety forum. At first, I said no, but Thomas reminded me, you're proof the system can work when someone listens. So I spoke, my voice shook, but I didn't stop. I talked about scars you can't see, and the power of being believed. When I stepped down, a girl hugged me. You said why I couldn't, she whispered. That was the moment I knew I'd started healing. Weeks later, I found a folder labeled Mom's letters tucked behind the kitchen cabinet. They weren't all gone. One was addressed to me. She wrote about trusting instincts, choosing kindness, and protecting my heart. You're stronger than you know. It ended. I wept for her. For what was stolen, for what I reclaimed. I pinned it beside my bed, not as proof of pain but of love. Some things Jake couldn't take, some things endured. Jake wrote from prison. I never opened the letter. Some voices deserve silence. I walked it to the backyard and lit it over the repeat. The paper curled, darkened, vanished. That night, I slept without the scarf for the first time. My dreams didn't tremble. I dreamed of Mom laughing, of Dad teaching me to ride a bike, of normal. When I woke up, it wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I had peace and choice. I started volunteering at a local youth shelter. I met kids who spoke in whispers, flinched at sounds. I listened, really listened. Sometimes I told them my story, just pieces. One girl cried when I said I'd been scared too. But you don't look scared, she said. I smiled, not anymore. Healing wasn't loud or fast, but it happened. I wasn't just Collie Morgan, survivor. I was a witness, and in my silence, others found strength. I sat by the ocean on the anniversary of the fire, alone, but not lonely. The scarf fluttered beside me. Anchored by a rock, I whispered thank you to the waves for carrying pain away little by little. I traced Mom's letter with my finger. You are stronger than you know. I said it aloud. My voice didn't crack, it echoed. I didn't need rescue anymore. I needed space to grow. That's exactly what I had. At home, I framed the first page of my notebook. The handwriting was messy, smudged from tears. If you're reading this, it means I'm still here. I was more than here, I was living. Thomas stopped by with cupcakes, 15 going on 30. He joked, I laughed. Not everything was heavy anymore. Some moments were just light. I looked around the room, no shadows, no shouting, just me, my space, my rules. I wasn't scared to breathe. Jake received a 15-year sentence with no parole for his role in our parents' deaths and for financial fraud. Aunt Nina, stripped of custody rights, moved states away in shame. I didn't follow what happened next. I was too busy building mine. The house sold quickly. With the proceeds and help from Thomas, I moved into a small rental close to school. I planted sunflowers in the yard, just like the one left on my locker. I visited my parents' graves, leaving white and yellow roses. You raised a fighter, I whispered. My emancipation was official, but the real victory was never legal, it was survival. I lit a candle that night, for memory, for growth for me, and I let it burn until morning. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.